Hey, welcome back to the garage, everyone. And our next project, shift bushings. All right, these are the parts we have. The bushings underneath the car that go from the rod to the shifter, and from the rod to the transmission are right here. We got two of those. I also went ahead and ordered the bushings that go into the interior of the shifter itself. These are really cheap. They're just $1 or $2 or something. I forgot what the cost was, but it was minimal. So I'm gonna go on a risk to avoid work, and I'm gonna assume just my bushings down below are bad. And if that turns out not to be the case, I'll take it all apart again and do the ones inside. But for now, we're just gonna do these guys right here. So next up, we're gonna have to figure out how to get this rod loose from the transmission. And I was taking a look at the clip that they use right here, and it's let's see, focus. All right, so I can't get my hand and my camera in there simultaneously, but that's not a huge deal. A screwdriver will pop that right off, I think. All right, not a huge deal. A little screwdriver, a little prizer action there, and that came right off. Taking a look at this, that's pretty cheap. I would have expected a little more from Mercedes than that. But it is what it is. It's tough and it lasts a long time. Well, that's the only thing that lasts a long time. The bushings sure don't. This is what we're going to do first. On the front one, we're just going to go ahead and remove this off of the car, and we're going to use a little small press method to get the bushing in this guy right here. So stay tuned. All right, that was not a huge deal at all. All we had was one bolt, a nut, and a washer that clamped this guy down onto the transmission. Once we got that off, got a little screwdriver underneath there and pried it right off, and it came right out. No big deal whatsoever. Just got to make sure that this guy right here doesn't move from this location, so I'm not gonna fiddle with that at all. I'm gonna keep my grubby little hands out of there. I'm not sure how it would move, but it might, so we're gonna leave it alone. For right now, we're gonna clean this up, and we're going to go over here. You'd think I'd keep all my parts in one location. And we're going to put a bushing in. Stand by. Now we're going to use a press type method to get this bushing into this transmission bracket or lever or whatever you want to call it. Take some white lithium grease. We'll take some white lithium grease and we'll put a dab on this guy to make our job a little easier. And he will go in there. Okay, next step, get ourselves a bolt. We're going to slip that down through there like that. Doing this with one hand, and we get our bushing started like that. Now we have our receiver, which in this case is a big socket. Okay, and then I've got a nut and a washer for this end, and we're just going to draw that guy up in there, and that's what we're going to do next. Alright, I had to run and hunt down some properly sized bolts. I needed a bolt that was thin enough to allow for compression of the bushing inward so that it could slip inside of that hole. Also, the hole had been boogered up pretty well from years of use without a bushing, and I cleaned it up with this guy right here. Okay, let's see, what are we doing? 7/16 and a screwdriver. The only bolt I could find was one with a basically a screw. Make some room on the bench here. We'll see how well this works. Alright, we're going to take that apart and see what happens. And hopefully it's in there instead of completely destroyed. And you know what happens? You know what's going to happen if I completely destroyed it? I'll buy another one. Because life goes on. Well, you look at that. Alright, we learned something. Okay, the press method works perfectly fine. And I'll tell you the secret to it. The bolt that you use has to be thin enough to allow for compression inward of this bushing. If you use something that's a little larger, let's say, that fits in there just right, that won't work. It just won't work, okay? I tried this one at first and it was a fail. So anyway, this little screw right here, I don't know what the dimension of that is. I would say that it's probably 1/2 to 3/4 of the diameter. Let me show you what it looks like there. See that right there? That's how much room you need. So, all right, we're going to put this guy back on the car. All right, we got this guy back up in there. One thing to note, this little guy, that little black piece of plastic right there, plastic, rubber, whatever it is, got to watch out for that. Make sure that it slips back into its little place right there. So it'll have a tendency to want to bend backwards. So you need to make sure that gets back in place properly. Go ahead and snug your bolt down pretty well. Don't get gorilla tight on it. But anyway, next thing we're going to do is going to get our clip right there on the end. So there's a little groove at the end of this shift rod, and we have got to get our clip into that groove. So it will slip on like that, and then the groove in that rod will need to fit into there, right there. All right, got the clip on there. I had to use two hands. There was no way I could film it. So basically I got my right hand up in here and I held this rod like this, and I got my left hand up in here with the clip, okay? And I was able to press it over the shaft and slip it downward like that. There are some websites online that tout that you need special tools for this project. I would argue that that is it's not completely false. I would imagine there are some tools that might make it a little easier if you wanted to do it on the car. Now granted, take a look at where I'm working, okay? I have a lift, so things are, you know, they're easier. And I admit that, they are easier. Way easier than if you're lying on your back, but I don't see why you couldn't do this job lying on your back anyway. One thing I did was inside the car before I lifted it, I pulled the shifter all the way back to the low gear position so that this arm was forward facing, okay? And that makes the job a lot easier. There's talk on the internet of having to lower the transmission to do this job. It's just not necessary. You can do this job with the stuff you have in your shop already. It's not that hard. Don't let anybody tell you that it is. Okay, and look back here. You see this one? It's wide open. I can get to it easily. I'm gonna go ahead and do this, and I'm not gonna film it because it's just it's so easy. I filmed the other one because it was complicated, but the procedure is the same. So I kind of went into this thinking, man, oh, I dreaded doing it. Oh, it's gonna be so difficult. No, it's not. So there you go. That's my advice for you. It's just not that hard. All right, that's it for now. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And your hands can be dirty too. Take it easy. Hey, I bet you thought I was going to leave you hanging, didn't you? All right, this is what we got. So I've got to use two hands to do all this mess. Maybe even three. All right, as the British would say, it was a bit of a faff. All right, I think we've got it. I think we have it pressed into the shifter rod. So let me pull this screw out of here and we'll take a look at it. Success!